Now, here we go. Confession time. If you fancy getting hold of one of our smart speakers, send in the best of the week. confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Today's comes from Mrs. Bear. Thanks, Mrs. Bear. Dear Simon and the Absolution Assembly.
Ooh,
which I like that. That's good.
I do like that.
As my children reach maturity, I feel compelled to unburden myself of this confession dating back over 10 years. At the time, our family had been living in America, a wonderful and exciting experience for the family, but which had come to an end and we were heading home. As a last hurrah, we had planned a road trip, ticking off some of the as yet unexplored highlights that the country has to offer. One of these was the spectacular geological wonder that is Yellowstone National Park.
Oh, nice.
As a footnote, you should appreciate that at the time our children were smallish, they were under 10, and that my husband, whilst externally appearing to be a grey-suited businessman, actually has the heart of someone such as Bear Grylls. Also, he would have you think. Thus, Bear, as we shall call him for this story, decided that the only authentic experience was to spend some nights under canvas in Yellowstone.
Oh, yeah.
One of the key appeals to the family was the spectacular array of wildlife at the park, including black and grizzly bears, bison and wolves. I am a reluctant camper at the best of times, and sleeping in this animal-infused environment filled me with dread, but for the sake of the rest of the family, I agree.
Bison?
Bison.
And that's the one that you're scared of?
I thought they were
Wolves?
extinct, but they were...
They're very big from what I mean, I'm not a bison expert. But
Anyway, it's a rare appearance of bison and grizzly bears in a confession. So we pitched our tent in a scenic campsite, cooked supper over open coals, paddled in the sulphuric-smelling creek, and smiled agreeably at our camping neighbours. The highlight of this particular part of the trip was to wake before dawn the next morning to go and spot wolves. So we packed... Very exciting.
I'm not getting in the tent. I'm not getting in the tent. I'm not getting in the
You're
tent.
not getting in the tent?
Bison and bears.
Go wolf
Oh, my.
spotting.
So we packed up our provisions and placed them all in the bear-proof storage bins, threw our rubbish into the similarly bear-proof trash cans, and hunkered down for the night, ready for an early start, having turned down the offer of a drink from our friendly neighbours, who we are now going to call the Waltons. I can only describe what followed as the longest night of my life. The Waltons turned out to be two brothers and their families, who had clearly been trying some of the local moonshine. Along with their guitar, the moonshine seemed to imagine going camping with a guitar.
Oh, and wolves.
Along with their guitar, the moonshine seemed to imbue the Walton brothers with some remarkable songwriting skills. As the night progressed, so did the songs, culminating in one entitled Brothers in the Buff, which has stayed with me to this day.
Amazing.
I want to hear
As
that.
my family slumbered around me, I enjoyed every glorious rendition until after approximately 10 minutes sleep, I was woken up by my Bear Grylls husband, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, raring to go on our wolf safari. After a fabulous trip, watching wolf cubs frolic at dawn, we arrived back at the campsite for breakfast. Sadly, by this stage, Mrs. Bear, that's me, was rather more a bear with a sore head, and it was in this rather uncharacteristic state of mind I decided to wreak my revenge. After breakfast, I asked the children to throw the debris in the trash bins. As the bear cubs rushed off to do it, I followed with the instruction, please make sure you slam the bins shut as loudly as you can.
Yeah.
At that young age, they complied without question and vigorously slammed the metal bins as noisily and frequently as they could. Okay, keep going, I said, and also shout, hoorah, hoorah. So they did that too. Now, bang and shout, we're going on a wolf hunt, it's going to be a big one, we're not scared, and so on. What a noise they made, Father Simon. Okay, let's round it off. And here I rattled my brain for a family favourite, with Postman Pat. So we all sang Postman Pat and his black and white cat, with the important line, early in the morning, just as day is dawning, and so on. Anyway, a few moments later, the Walton brothers emerged from their tent, an interesting shade of green, and singing no more, hallelujah. They said something like, The traditional sound of unwellness. Shame, huh? Anyway, I need to confess, Father Sam, I need to confess my crime of misappropriation of parental authority. With apologies firstly to the majority of the residents of our Yellowstone campsite that night, awoken prematurely by some rather antisocial bin banging, and secondly to my poor innocent bear cubs who were conduits for my vengeful rage. I do not, however, apologise to all the Walton brothers, who unsurprisingly seemed to fail to reach fame and fortune with their song Brothers in the Buff. Unfortunately, I can't tell you how Brothers in the Buff goes, but it's obviously quite a fine tale. It stayed in Mrs. Bear's head. Thankfully, it's not in ours. Let's check in then with the voice of moral responsibility, Sister Susie from the pub.
Oh, Mrs. Bear. Do you know what? I think I'm in a forgiving mood tonight because I think I agree with you. I think that would be highly annoying if I was camping. Even with some earplugs, moonshine and guitars purely would be just too noisy. So I think I'm going to forgive you.
If you go on holiday with a guitar, it's an unforgivable sin. Anyway.
I do take my ukulele with me.
Oh, dear me.
Really?
Brother from another gutter?
Not going camping with Suze. Okay, right, I mean, obviously, never take your guitar anywhere and definitely never bring it out uninvited and say, oh, it's a bit late, think I'll bring out my... No, nobody wants to hear you on your guitar, Gerald. Also, why are you camping under canvas when they're even making the bins burr-proof? That's your sign. Don't be in anything less than metal if it's going to be burr-proof bins. Oh, dear, oh, dear.
And so
deserve
therefore...
everything you get. Definitely forgiven.
OK, so Mrs. Bear is forgiven in the studio, but is she forgiven in the UK as a whole? 61054 on the text for the people's verdict. You start your message with Simon. Forgiveness or no for Mrs. Bear? Tonight's confession came from Mrs. Bear. It took us to Yellowstone National Park with bears, bison and wolves, and the singing Walton brothers with their moonshine. Mrs. Bear took revenge with a little bit of help from her kids. And the people's verdict is in, and Brother Matthew has it.
So Neil and Lucy in Brighton say, forgiven, we'd have done the same. Matt, stop being a wimp. Harsh. Gary and Leeds.
Yeah, because when it comes to bears, you run a mile, snowflake.
Yes. Gary and Leeds says, deliverance comes to mind.
Yes.
Dueling banjos, forgiven. An alternative view from Ray, not forgiven. The Waltons clearly saved your lives by selflessly staying up all night and scurrying off the local wildlife as you slept in your unburr-proof canvas tent. You should be grateful you're still alive. And finally, Mike in Radstock says, Simon, forgiven, but as the joke said, what's the difference between a buffalo and a bison? You can't wash your hands in a buffalo. Come on.
Right. Okay.
Well done.
Well, it was terrible. Maybe you have a campsite confession. Maybe moonshine was taken. Maybe there were bears, lions and tigers involved. Probably there weren't. But anyway, if you have one for us, we would love to have it. And if it's our favourite, you get that smart speaker. Everybody wants the smart speaker. Simon at greatesthitsradio.co.uk is the general show email for your confession. It's confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Basically, where we were. I thought you said hello to my colleagues in the coal industry.
But it wasn't that, it was the travel industry.
It was the travel industry.
It sounds so similar to coal.
That's right. Could confuse a stupid person. And indeed it did. Anyway, we're nicely lined up for today's confession, which comes from Jordan, the Wolf of Yarmouth. Just make a note of that. So, yeah, the Wolf of Yarmouth.
There's wolves in yesterday's confession.
Yeah, absolutely. Wolves.
Week.
Yes. We need more wolf-based confessions. Let me just make a prediction at this point. Not forgiven.
Oh,
just
really?
saying that.
Wow.
I'm not steering the jury, of course. Dear Simon of the Collective, one February several years ago, the wife and myself...
Okay. There you go.
Not forgiven.
Strike one.
There you go. He then does add Corinne in brackets.
Oh.
Went on a 4-night break to Great Yarmouth. We had never visited Yarmouth before, and so we were looking forward to a little exploring. One of our little joys is to seek out old character public houses that sell cask ales for me and good white wine for the wife. I mean, it's almost like from the pub landlord, isn't it, really?
Wow.
On our arrival on the Monday afternoon, our first stroll out in the bracing February sea air, we came across such a place that proffered fine ales and wines. However, it appeared closed, so we moved on, finding another open establishment further down the seafront. Over the next 2 days, we passed this establishment several times, both afternoon and evenings, and still there appeared to be little activity. However, on the Thursday afternoon, as we neared the pub, we noticed that the doors were open and the lights were on. Excellent, we thought. We can do a visit after all. On entering, it was everything we'd expected. Wood panelling, sea and boat paintings and prints, plus other bits and pieces that ordained such a place. On approaching the bar, "Landlubbers ahoy," I call.
Oh, dear.
I noticed
Wow.
I noticed a number of customers who were all seated near one another in one of the corners. The choice of beer was limited to 2. There was an ale that I do drink. So after the usual pleasantries with the bar lady, I ordered it along with a large dry white for the wife. Now, I should say, normally I change this kind of stuff because, just to make it read more pleasant. But I feel editorially it's sound to leave it the way the Wolf of Yarmouth has actually written it.
Okay. Yeah.
And a pint of Pinot Grigio for Madam, I call. I took a sip of my beer as I turned to further survey the surroundings. It was only then I realised the sombre atmosphere and hushed voices and smart dress of the customers. We were in a funeral gathering, a post-funeral gathering, and my cheerful bonhomie maybe was a little out of place.
I think it was.
Now, unfortunately, the beer was not of great quality, and Corinne indicated that her wine was not that good, and there's Susie there from the pub. And also that the wine was a little tepid. I thought about complaining, but decided against it, not wanting to cause a scene, considering the post-death situation that we found ourselves.
Post-death. Brilliant,
We'd like to book your pub for a post-death situation. Instead, we decided to drink as much as we could stomach before moving on. In the opposite corner from the group of people was a quiz machine. 50 pence a game with a chance to win a jackpot of £10. We like to have a go on these machines, and so to kill a little time whilst waiting for our drink to digest, we sidled over to it. I put £1 in and we commenced the first game, only to be beaten on the second round of questions, having used up all our extra lives and passes. However, the second game was totally different. We went question after question, getting answer after answer correct, and to our surprise, we got the final question correct. We reached the £10 jackpot with 1 life remaining. I suggested that we collect the money and move on, leaving what was left of our drinks. After all, we now had funds for a beverage elsewhere. I pressed the collect button. There was a pause, a long pause, and it looked as though we weren't going to get our reward at all. And then, to our shock and horror and disbelief, there was a cacophony of noise as pound coin after pound coin cascaded into the metal collection tray. Ching, ching, ching! Prize alarm, prize alarm! The machine was having a convulsion. This appeared to take an eternity, but in reality, probably only about 10 seconds. Needless to say, there were many more than 10 coins that we were expecting. Now, I looked around. There were several glowering looks from the funeral party. As you can imagine, the clang, 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 win, win, win alarm hadn't gone down too well. So as nonchalantly as possible, I took another sip of my remaining beer while scooping coins with the other hand into my pocket, and I pushed them into my jacket and my jeans. Put the glass down and finished emptying the tray, looked at Corinne. She nodded. We left the premises a little quicker than we went in. We walked to our next venue in more or less silence, unable to comprehend what had just happened. We purchased drinks with some of our ill-gotten gains and sat in a corner to count what was left. We had 96 £1 coins.
What?
We had won £96. That afternoon, a high street fashion chain benefited from some of Corinne's share, whilst I returned to a pottery, which we had visited the previous day, where I purchased a collectible glazed tankard, which had taken my fancy. I told it was the pub landlord, but on the day could not justify spending a cost of £24, but now I could. That evening we again walked past this pub, and as I thought it would be, it was closed. Maybe they never opened again due to terrible losses caused by the £96 that I had cost them. To this day, we don't know what happened and could only put it down to a machine fault. Maybe I had special powers that day, but I need forgiveness on 2 counts. 1, we'd gate-crashed such a solemn occasion and possibly caused distress with our bonhomie. 2, that we acquired additional spends that I'm not entirely sure we were entitled to. We should have returned our ill-gotten gains, as someone else would have taken the rap. But we didn't, so jog on, loser. That's the way the markets operate. Kind regards, Jordan.
Right.
Wow.
Jordan, the Wolf of Yarmouth.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's just check in. People's verdict shortly. Sister Susie from the pub.
Well,
therefore not the most impartial person.
Do you know what? I just think you were rude, Jordan. I'm not going to forgive you because I understand if the place didn't have very nice beer or wine, but you have to tell them so that they can fix it. Walking away or not drinking it ain't going to do anybody any favours. And also, maybe if you'd given the extra money back, maybe they could have afforded some nice beer. So not forgiven from me.
Yes. Brother from another gutter?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot not to forgive. But, you know, I have to say, anyone who ever uses the phrase, that's the way the market operates, I'm going to say you and I are not going to get along. 96 quid, though. Yes, indeed. I do love a quiz machine, but I'm not going to forgive, I'm afraid, Jordan. It's the calling Kareen the wife.
Yes, that was the
throughout.
start, was
I'm
it?
afraid it's all over for you, sunshine. Not forgiven.
Okay, people's verdict, that's the most important thing, though. Do you forgive Jordan, yes or no? On the text 61054, start your message with Simon. The people's verdict expected coming in the next hour. We brought you today's confession from Jordan, the Wolf of Yarmouth. A torrid tale of taking 96 quid that he really wasn't entitled to, even though it was, you know, the fruit machine did cough it up. But he was slightly insensitive in the delicate surroundings of a
Slightly.
post-death situation. Let's see what the people's verdict is. Matthew has
So pretty much everyone's forgiving. Brian, yes.
Yeah.
Brian says, is it possible that they were playing for 100 quid and not a tenner and misread the machine? Either way, I can forgive that. I can forgive it, as I doubt many would pat up a bit extra for a prize. But deciding to have a go on the machines whilst there was a wait going on, not forgivable there. And Jan Screeton from Cliff near Selby in North Yorkshire says, I absolutely forgive Jordan. If the pub was having a funeral wake and didn't want others coming in, they should have put a sign up. You can't know what you don't know. As for the 96 quid, I forgive him for that as well. The machine is probably the property of an outside company, and it's their fault for not servicing their machine correctly. I do agree that the wife was somewhat derogatory, though.
Do you know how many times you put a sign up and people just walk straight past it? I bet that pub probably had a sign and nobody paid any attention to it.
yeah.
I'm stunned. Anyway, the people's verdict is in, and the people have spoken. Well, some of them have. So if you have a confession, we would love to hear it. confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Well, here's today's confession, which hopefully will just be on its own as a fine feature. It comes from Gordon, who says, in God's own country. That's what he says. Father Simon, Monsieur Matt, and saintly Sister Susie. My confession goes back to a time when cars used to break. I've taken so much. We have chopped away at this.
Really?
Goes back to a time when cars used to break down all the time, but were usually easy to fix with just a few rusty spanners and a smattering of bad language. Sadly, my father had a razor-sharp talent for buying the sort of cars that would rapidly turn a brand new workshop manual into a dog-eared, grease-stained testament to everything that could possibly go wrong with a car. So I learned from an early age how to fix them. I became fearless. There was nothing that I would not tackle. As soon as I passed my test and before I bought my own car, Dad's car became the ticket to adventure. Now, this time I had a very enthusiastic girlfriend we'll call Lucille. She lived in the next town. 3 bus rides or a 45-minute drive away. Took a lot of that out. Once you factor in travelling time, it made our dates very rushed affairs. Imagine my joy then when my mum announced that at short notice she'd booked a coach holiday for the pair of them. That's her and Dad rather than her and Lucille. I would have the car and the house entirely to myself for a long weekend. Lucille sounded pretty pleased too, let me tell you. But no sooner had I put the phone down than I heard the doom-laden sound of Dad arriving home in his latest car. Imagine the sound if you put a house brick in a washing machine and put it on fast spin. That. Cursory investigation suggested major problems, the sort that would involve taking out the entire engine, gearbox and other oily bits, even to figure out what precisely was wrong. I set to work on Saturday morning disconnecting stuff and hoisting out the big bits. Sunday was spent taking it all to pieces, and at lunchtime on Monday I got a workmate to run me to the scrapyard to source the replacement bits needed. I spent my midweek evenings after work putting it all back together again. I didn't even get time to see the enthusiastic Lucille, who was hopefully missing me terribly and looking forward to our reunion. Driving to Lucille's, I began to notice an almost perceptible noise, the sort of sound that my dad would have attributed to newness. I would have turned up the radio, but the car didn't have one, so I just ignored it. Before I'd even stopped the car outside her home, Lucille was on her way out of the house, and she was surely a sight to behold. Her new dress looked tremendous, but as she climbed into the car, it was the impossibly high heels and seamed silk stockings that caught my eye.
Wow.
The drive back to mine, as they say, was leisurely, and we chatted away excitedly about our plans for the weekend. For a brief moment, it was the happiest I've ever been in my entire life. But that once faint noise now grew gradually more noticeable, more insistent, more threatening, sinister even. It then became a regular knocking like some malign spirit in the attic of a haunted house. Inevitably, physical manifestations of the evil began. Just as I remarked, if I didn't know better, I'd swear a wheel is about to fall off. One front corner lurched into the air, and I watched in slow motion as a wheel, an entire wheel, bounced down the road like some demented rugby ball. The now unsupported corner banged down to the ground, and the big 3/4-inch nut on the bottom of the suspension gouged a deep groove in the tarmac as we shuddered to a halt. Now, I'd like to think that I didn't say to Lucille, go and get the wheel, but she thinks I did. Anyway, I walked back up the road to see if I could find the now absent wheel nuts. When I returned, the wheel was beside the car, awaiting its fitting. Lucille and her overnight bag stood waiting at a bus stop a short distance away on the other side of the road. Her beautiful new dress and expensively stockinged legs were splattered with mud from the ditch where the wheel had come to rest. The look on her face made everything clear. The bus came and went, and so did she. The wheel went back on before sunset. The car was parked up at home, and I was in the pub at the end of the road. So, Father Simon, we haven't actually got to the worst bit. I beg forgiveness not from my dad, who was never any the wiser, certainly not from Lucille, who soon afterwards took up with a sales rep. No, I seek forgiveness from the citizens of my hometown. You see, I did plan to take a look at that big suspension nut that had suffered so grievously when it got its face ground into the tarmac, but my dad soon traded the car for another basket case, so the opportunity was lost. Near the centre of town, I have to tell you, is a massive roundabout with 6 dual carriageways and A roads converging there. It's a problem. Yes. Pretty much anyone going anywhere has to negotiate this traffic island. One sweltering late summer rush hour, the town came to a complete grinding halt. Thousands sat baking in the heat in their Cortinas and Allegros, cursing my very birth. A mate of mine, you see, was caught in the jam on his way home from work. After over 2 hours, when his bus inched to the front of the queue at the roundabout, there he spied my dad's old car. It sat utterly immovable, sideways across 2 of the 3 lanes, down at one corner with one front wheel tipped out at a jaunty angle, but wholly unnatural. Sort of my car, so sort of my fault. From Gordon in God's own country, looking for forgiveness, whether he's going to get it or not, I'm not at all sure. The voice of responsibility, Sister Susie from the pub, what do you say?
Oh, well, Gordon, it did make me laugh, and I have to give you that. I needed a good giggle, so thank you very much for that. However, I'm just glad no one got hurt, because someone could have got seriously injured, so therefore, I'm not going to forgive you.
There you go, voice of responsibility, Brother Matt.
Oh, I say, Lucille, with your enthusiasm. I'm going to forgive, because it's not his fault, is it? It's the car. It's you got rid of the car, and someone else had a problem with the car. So it's not his... my first car was an absolute nightmare. Everything went wrong with that. So I can absolutely sympathise. So, yes, not his car. Not his car with the roundabout, so... no problem. I definitely forgive him.
He should have fixed it.
You should have fixed it.
Well,
have some responsibility in your life, brother from another gutter.
Yeah.
He did.
People's verdict, please. 61054. Start your message with Simon. Do you forgive Gordon? That's
Gordon. Yeah.
61054. First word has to be Simon. Do that. I think it's a good idea. The people's verdict is in on today's confession, which came from Gordon. It was about his broken down car and his delightful girlfriend who fixed the wheel, but he lost the girlfriend. Anyway, and then it caused tremendous problems right in the middle of town. People's verdict is here. How's it looking?
So Mally in County Durham says, Gordon should have just got the bus. Not forgiven. No woman, no cry. And Jerry from Western Supermare says, forgiven. You picked a fine time to leave me. Loose wheel springs to mind.
Loose wheel.
Come
very
on.
good. I like that. I like that very much. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk for your tale. Today in the confessional, we have to decide which is the best confession of the week. But we can't make that decision just yet because we haven't heard all of them. We have another confession. Maybe you've heard a confession this week. It's made you thought, you know what? I quite fancy a smart speaker because I can send him one that's funnier than that one? Well, if that's you, confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Sort of like a page and a half of A4 is fine. 1 sentence is not enough.
Not enough.
10 pages is way, way too much. And no laxatives, and it has to be legal. If it involves a crime, like if you rob a bank, for example,
that's not a confession.
It's not getting on. Also, anything that wastes police time is also never going to get on. Okay, socially irresponsible. We don't do that kind of thing. Anyway, there's a lot of Spanish involved in this one, by the way.
Here
Matt,
we go.
So you'll need to chip in if I get it hopelessly wrong. It comes from Fifi. Thank you, Fifi. Father Simon, Sister Susie, Brother Matthew from another gutter. After 34 years, I thought it was time to seek your forgiveness for an incident which took place in the mid-80s when I was 19. It will also give Simon the perfect excuse to exhibit his Spanish accent. Well, fortunately, that's not very good, but Matt's is perfect because he is fluid in Spanish. Isn't that right, Matt?
I am.
Answer in
You
Spanish.
should have said
C.
C.
Oh, right, sorry.
Amazing. He might speak Spanish, but he's a bit slow.
Okay, a bit slow.
Not very quick with it.
Lentamente.
Myself and my boyfriend of that, it's too late now. Myself and my boyfriend of that time had been invited by my parents to join them for a week's holiday in Mallorca, together with my eldest sister, her husband, and their 2 young daughters. When we arrived at our hotel, the sun was shining, the resort looked beautiful, and the pool looked inviting. The first 2 days were glorious. We spent the time lounging by the pool. Then in the evening, after dinner at the hotel, we would walk into town for a local drink. Everyone said in Spanish, "It's really glorious."
I mean, hace mucho sol.
There you go. Unfortunately, on day Unfortunately, on day 3, we awoke to a scene similar to that from The Perfect Storm. The sky was black, the rain was horizontal, the pool water was brown, and the palm trees around the pool were bent double in gale force winds. Can I just say at this point, in The Perfect Storm, the movie, there's no swimming pool.
That's true.
Wow.
Worse than this, when I turned on the taps at the bathroom, in the bathroom sink, no water appeared. I optimistically tried the bath taps too, but alas, to no avail. I walked round to my parents' room, which was next door, and inquired whether they had any water, and the answer was no. This was obviously the case for the whole hotel, as when we made our way downstairs, the reception area was rammed with unhappy holidaymakers, all being given the same answer by the exasperated staff. Nostromo no tenemos agua.
Nosotros no tenemos agua.
We have no water.
Agua.
Also, they said, "Stop complaining, you miserable British." How would you say that?
Oh, come
how
on.
Would that go?
I can't remember what complain is. Oh, yeah. Deja de quejarse.
There you go. That's what they were saying everywhere. Several guests were complaining of rain leaking through their windows. In fact, my sister and her family, whose room was on the top floor, had to be relocated to another room after they found water dripping through the ceiling onto their daughter's cot. Apparently, the storm had disrupted the water supply to the hotel resort, and it soon became apparent that the toilets were also affected as a foul-smelling toilet fog slowly became apparent. Yes.
No.
Spread throughout the hotel. The wind and rain were giving the hotel a right battering, so our glum party went off to find the hotel lounge along with 400 other miserable-looking guests, and we found an area to play cards and entertain the 2 younger members of our party. But we were grateful that we were at least dry.
Yes.
That didn't last long. After several mind-numbing hours of Snap and Chase the Ace, the rain subsided, so my dad announced that we should venture out and find somewhere to have dinner. "I'll just go up to the room and change my shoes," declared my mum. So the rest of us stood in the main entrance and waited. And waited. And waited. After about 20 minutes, my dad, not known for his patience, said to me, "What on earth is your mother doing up there?" I should explain at this point, she has a history of being somewhat accident-prone. So bearing that in mind, I quickly made my way up the stairs to the 2nd floor, which was underwater. As I approached my parents' room, the door was wide open and I could see a flurry of activity inside. There were 3 flustered-looking chambermaids armed with mops and towels, one of whom scurried past me shrieking in Spanish, with the only words I recognized were "Señor, agua, agua."
Which is, yes, is it? Madam Water.
There you go, that's right.
Very good.
Excellent.
Then as I got to the doorway, my mother appeared to float towards me on the bedroom rug. There she goes. And slowly came to hover in front of me. What's going on? I inquired in bewilderment. And she says, well, apparently someone somewhere left their bath taps on, according to my mum, and their bath has filled up, and when the water came back on, it's overflowed into our room and then out into the corridor. It took about 5 seconds for the penny to drop, and I realised with horror that myself and my boyfriend were in fact the someone on the corridor who'd left their taps on that morning, but I obviously hadn't turned them back off again or noticed that the plug was in the plug hole.
No.
Probably a feng shui thing, because if you leave the plug in the hole, all the chi can't flow away.
Right. Sorry.
Remember, you need to remember
I let that slip,
You need
didn't
to
I?
make that
Sorry.
Oh dear, I offered, and then added, will you be coming down soon? Mum muttered something about wet shoes, and she said, I don't think it was my fault. Anyway, unsure what to say, I slipped away back downstairs where the rest of the family were waiting. I said, I have good news and bad news. My father said, go on. Well, the good news is that Mum should be down in a few moments. The bad news is your room and the floor has been flooded. A mixture of expletives fell from my dad's mouth, followed by, what's your mother done now? Apparently water overflowed, I said, from a bath in a room near to ours, but not ours, not next door. My boyfriend shot a surprised look in my direction. I shot him one back that said, don't say a word. The walk into town was a quiet one. My dad refused to speak to my mum, as if holding her responsible. She often had mishaps like this, so we walked behind, subduing our sniggers. Maybe the water had flowed under our room, we said, and into theirs. Anyway, the thing is, Father Simon, we let someone else take the blame, and that someone happened to be my mother. I therefore seek forgiveness from my lovely mum and my dearly departed dad, plus yourselves for my mum's soggy shoes and unintentionally ruining their holiday. And all you had to do was actually just own up and say, it was you, Fifi. Anyway, let's check it with Sister Susie, who's in charge.
Do you know, it did make me laugh. It was very, very good. However, it's a bit mean to your mum, and I just think, just you know, admit it. Come clean. You can't do that and then not say, oh, by the way, I spoil all your stuff.
This is the first time Fifi has admitted that it was
yeah. How many years? She's lived with that with her family. No, I can't forgive you, Fifi, I'm afraid.
Brother from another gutter.
So, I mean, can we really be sure that it was Fifi's fault? I mean, it could have been that the mum also, because of not having anywhere to put the chi, that she left the plug hole out as well. Could have been anyone on that floor who was, where am I going to put my chi? It's, well, we're going to need to take the plug out, obviously. So, for that reason, really, I choose to forgive.
Well, there's a surprise. Okay, so it's the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Fifi? Yes or no? That's the deal. 61054 on the text, start your message with Simon. Forgiveness or no for a spoiled holiday and blaming her mother? I think not. 61054. Tonight's confession was from Fifi and was all about blaming her mum for a disaster on holiday. The people's verdict like this.
So Jill says, got to forgive for this one, as it sounds like her mum has a good sense of humour and will find it quite funny after all these years. And yes, and Brandon says it was very unfortunate. It could have happened to any room, but sadly happened to them. Wrong place, wrong time. Forgiven.
Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk for your confession. You can win a smart speaker. Let's decide who wins this one. Favourite confession of the week. Monday's confession was from Mrs. Bear. You remember that about fellow campmates at Yellowstone Park? A little bit of an early wake-up call after they'd been singing throughout the night, Brothers in the Buff or something like that.
Drinking the moonshine.
Then there was Jordan the Wolf of Yarmouth's confession and the jackpot machine and gate crashing the funeral. Gordon provided yesterday's confession about the loose wheel on the car, and then he lost his girlfriend and then caused a traffic jam. And we've heard about Fifi and flooding of the hotel. Sister Susie, I think, is going to go first as she is in charge.
I think I'm going to give it to Mrs. Bear. I think.
The Yellowstone, I agree with that.
Just for actually camping.
It makes Matt's vote irrelevant, but Matt...
But the good news is that
Yes.
I concur with the group, because we're no iron team, and so therefore let's say Mrs. Bear.
Okay.
3
out of 3, Mrs. Bear, you're the winner. You get the smart speaker. If you would like next week's smart speaker, send us your confession. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk.